Hi there. Welcome back to Teacher Jab or Mr. Jablonski's World History course. We're going to be continuing the Asian subcontinent in this lesson. And today we'll be talking about the Asian subcontinent's geography, looking at the relative size of the continent, tectonic shifts, or looking at the movement of Earth's plates, and how that impacts India and the countries surrounding it. We'll also be looking at glacial melt and how that is impacted by the monsoons, and of course the Ganges and river valleys. I hope you're noticing that each time we start a new unit, new rivers come into play, and they're also used in new ways, kind of building on the concepts from one to the other. But let's move on to the next slide. Comparing the subcontinent with other places. If you look right around here, you'll see the gray figure, and that is the Asian subcontinent, or largely India, compared with the lower 48, or the continental United States. And in the middle of that, you'll see Great Britain. You can see that India is a large place, but not quite as large as the United States. However, it has 4 times the population of the United States, and roughly the same amount of arable land. As you know, the Rocky Mountains in our west, in this region here, are inhospitable largely, and not much of our population lives there. India has some unique areas like that, a desert to its west, and some mountains to its north, but most of it is quite arable. Why do you think Great Britain is included on this map? Why would that be? Well, the reason is Britain ruled over India for hundreds of years. And this little island not only ruled over India, but a good quarter of the world's population and land area for a long time during the late 1800s and early 1900s. They say the sun never sets on the British Empire. No longer is that true, but it is well to know that England, or the United Kingdom, did rule or colonize much of the planet and was considered a world or maybe hyperpower during that time period before World War I. India gained its independence after World War II by a well-known figure, Mahatma Gandhi, a world leader and also someone who really professed the idea of peace and nonviolence. His ideas helped liberate India from the British rule and also gave some inspiration to other important leaders. You may recognize Martin Luther King's philosophies of nonviolence. He got a lot of those ideas from Mahatma Gandhi. If you look down at the bottom here, we can see that India is a good chunk of Asia, or the Eurasian Asia, and that gray area here as well. And that's just giving you context for how it fits within the entire continent. But let's move on to the next slide. Plate tectonic shift. I'd like for you to analyze this for a moment, and it kind of explain to your neighbor what is happening in this image, looking at the years, the images, and trying to come up with a story of what is actually happening here. You can talk to your neighbor for about 30 seconds or so, and then we'll restart the video. Please pause the video. So hopefully you noticed that at one point, the Asian subcontinent, or India, was an island 71 million years ago. And slowly, through tectonic shifts, this plate has moved gradually north, and actually twisted slightly, looking at the bottom image here compared to the top, as it's been slamming into the Eurasian plate. About 10 million years ago that had happened. And it's continuing to move and force a massive amount of pressure between the two plates. And here we're seeing the topography of those two plates as they meet, the different mountain ranges that have been created. Not to mention the different river valleys, namely the Indus and the Ganges to the east. I'm now going to let you talk to your partner and answer this question, and I'll see you in a moment. Please pause the video. Welcome back. And now that you've read the question, you should have realized that C is the correct answer because the continental drift of the Asian subcontinent has created the Himalayan mountains. And if we look back, we can see how there is actually a low-lying area where the Ganges River lies. And just north, just covering a couple hundred miles, we then have these tremendous mountain ranges being built within Nepal and southern China. So C is the correct answer for question number 1. Turning to the next slide, we're seeing marine life on mountains. This is shocking. Take a moment, please look and read through this slide, and then try and explain what is happening with this slide. Please pause the video. As you can see, there's actually a fossil left in this limestone. And the slide says here that these fossils are now thousands of feet above sea level. I'd actually like to use the idea of miles above sea level, considering most of these peaks are well above 2,000 feet above sea level. So what was once an island and a beach has now slowly moved across and then creating these mountains as it hits the Eurasian plate, forcing the two plates up into the heavens. This is amazing. Trillions of, hundreds of trillions of tons of stone and earth have been moved upwards into the sky over the course of millions of years. This is an amazing feat. And if we turn to the next slide, we'll see that all of these wrinkles here represent these mountains that have been created by the Indian plate hitting the Eurasian plate. And circled in red, you'll see Mount Everest. And to the north and slightly west, you'll find K2, the second highest peak, which is in Pakistan. Mount Everest lies within Nepal and China. It is so massive it actually crosses two nation boundaries. And there are thousands of other peaks which are nearly as tall, ranging from 20 to 25,000 feet above sea level. It's important to note that Mount Everest is about 29,035 feet above sea level and growing every year at roughly between 5 and 7 inches per year. If we turn to the next slide, we'll see a satellite view of the foothills of the Himalayas in the north, in the top picture. And as we travel north, we'll see these mountains grow, and behind we'll see the Tibetan Plateau. In the last image, you've seen the Tibetan Plateau labeled here. It is a very high region within China, and a few people live here, a few tens of hundreds of thousands. These typically are Tibetans, and although it's a very difficult place to live, they make their living in that difficult environment. So that is the foothills and the larger mountains within the Himalayan range. And to the bottom here, we'll see Mount Everest, the tallest mountain in the world, and the farmland that sits in its foreground before it. This picture was taken from the Nepal perspective of the mountain, as the backside, or the Chinese side, is almost impossible to trek through. So most people who climb this mountain actually first land into Nepal and then travel up through the mountain range into China. So you see my famous hidden hashes here. I'm going to reveal them all at the same time, and I'd like for you to add them to your notes and look at them as well. Him, meaning snow, and Alea, meaning home, or snow home, or this home of the snow. Also add to this that 1/6 of all the world's fresh water is in the peaks of these massive, incredible mountains, in the form of glaciers and snow. Through millions of years of monsoon winds, these precipitations have been left here, and some of the snow or glaciers there is thousands of years old. Please give my students a moment to take down these notes, and please pause the video. So these snow-capped mountains are snow-capped because of these monsoon wind patterns, which we've discussed before in our last unit. But just to review, the winds move from the high pressure over the Indian Ocean to the low pressure on the continent of Asia, and bring with them warm, wet winds known as precipitation or rain that floods the continent with needed water. And then as you travel over the higher peaks, that water becomes ice and snow and still remains in those mountains. Moving to the next one, we'll see the same concept of those winds and maybe a little more direction on the direction of those winds over the topography of India. You're familiar with this. I won't spend too much time. But some of the world's largest mountains rest here. And not only do we have lots of rain, but some desert to the north and west on the border of Pakistan. Not all of those winds do reach the entire Asian subcontinent. Looking at the next slide, here we're seeing the Ganges River system. And let's first trace the Ganges River. I want to show you the main part of this river system. And I'm not following it exactly, but I'm giving the basic concept of the river Ganges. Up from the mouth of the Ganges, or the delta of the Ganges, north up into the Himalayas. You see all these little lines, these little squiggles, going from south to north and north to south, adding to the Grand Ganges, and we call these tributaries. It's important to note that the Nile is not the only river that does go north. As you can see, there are dozens of rivers that go north slowly into the Ganges River. So, familiarizing or remembering the mountain ranges in the north, what's to the south, and this vast network of tributaries into the Mother Ganges, I'd like for you to now answer the next two questions. Questions 2 and 3. You may speak with your partner and then answer these questions. Please answer both questions, and then I'll come back and review them as a class. Please pause the video. In this question, I was hoping you would notice that the rain from the monsoons would naturally fill the rivers, and also the snow melt from the Himalayas. I could understand E, although much of the river flow does not come from China, but rather northern India and Nepal or Bhutan. But I do understand that answer. Question 3 reinforces the same idea that the glacier melt in the Himalayas and the monsoon winds both add to the Ganges flow. The monsoon winds both rain in lower elevations, snow in higher elevations, and slowly after hundreds or thousands of years, unfortunately more recently, this melt has been happening more quickly. But that glacial melt does add to the Ganges River from all these tributaries in the north, results of the melting snow in the foothills and the massive peaks of the Himalayan mountains, while the rivers in the south largely come from the monsoon winds and normal rain patterns that occur. But both add to the mighty Mother Ganges. Which leads me to this slide. Mother Ganges. What do these pictures tell you about the relationship the people of India have with the Ganges? For a moment, I'd like for you to analyze all 4 of these images and title them. By looking at the clues of the image, to give a title that would correlate with what's happening. You may speak with your neighbor, write these titles, and then we'll meet back as a class to discuss them. Please pause the video. If you haven't done so, you should discuss them as a class. I won't be adding much from my screencast here, but you can pause it again, or I'm going to move on. Let's turn to the next slide. The Ganges is an incredibly important river within the Asian subcontinent. But another incredible river, and one I've actually been to, is the Indus River, which largely flows through Pakistan. And you can see it also starts in the foothills and the peaks of the Himalayan mountains and then flows the entire distance of Pakistan, emptying into the Indian Ocean. I'm going to reveal my little blank here and point out that this is one of the world's longest rivers and also one of the most important, which is the beginnings of the inhabitants of the Harappan civilization and also the Aryan civilizations, which we'll discuss a little later in the unit. To the right, we see enormous mountains, not snow-capped, probably because it's summertime when this picture was taken, but you can also see the muddy waters of the Indus as they wind and meander through these mighty peaks south into the thirsty southern Pakistan. We're now going to answer another question regarding the Indus River, and we'll come back and discuss it. Please pause the video. Hopefully, you'll remember from my short lecture just a moment ago that Pakistan gets most of the water that the Indus River supplies, not India, China, or Turkey. Moving on. The Harappan civilization. It is, of course, one of the earliest known civilizations in the subcontinent. Had impressive cities, and most importantly, developed a writing system, which we'll analyze a little later on. So these are the big 4 points I want to discuss while we look at the Harappan civilization. So, we've seen this map a couple times now, and it is a unique view of the world, looking from the North Pole, and basically as if you peeled out the other continents, maintaining the Arctic Ocean and allowing the other continents to be seen in a different way. So, we discussed that Africa, seen here, has the origin of man, and slowly humans migrated throughout the world following these black arrows to every reach of the planet, exception of Antarctica. So we've visited this many times now, and we can see now that humans entered the Asian subcontinent, either on the coast or through the foot passes of the Himalayan mountains. I'd like for you now to open this web link and look through a couple of the slides, looking at some of the history's mysteries that maybe have been overlooked. Please pause the video. Hopefully you found that interesting and noticed the Harappans and the importance they had, but we're going to move on now. The Harappan civilization had planned cities, meaning that there was some thought behind which way the roads went and which way the buildings were created. We're also going to look at some of the achievements the Harappans created, even though they existed a long time ago. And we're going to look at the mysterious written language, and we'll know why it's mysterious a little later on. And we'll also kind of question the sudden and mysterious, once again, fall of the Harappan civilization. But let's look at the next slide. Take a moment and analyze this map. And I'd like for you to remember, as best you can, the other civilizations that might have existed at this same time period as the Harappans. And also look at the different dots here and what they might mean. I'll see you in a minute. Please pause the video. So you're noticing that there are numerous villages and cities and towns within this region. And some predate the Harappans. Maybe it was part of a Neolithic revolution, and there are small villages that appeared there. But there are also quite a few Harappan established towns and villages that became part of the civilization, all highlighted in orange, and many of which are along the Indus River. Let's look at the next slide. So, looking at Afro-Eurasia at the same time period, we're seeing that there were multiple civilizations that existed within the same time frame, but all over the world. Let's look to the next slide. Here are some achievements. I'd like for you to look through this slide and also the textbook pages listed to the right and take some notes on the major achievements of the Harappans and what it was like in one of their most important cities. Use this image to make some inferences about the people and also the text, which you'll read through. And take notes in your packet, and we'll meet back to discuss. It should take about 5 minutes, and the report should take another couple of moments. I'll let the class report out on their own. So at this time, please pause the video. Hopefully after your discussions, you discovered that this was an advanced civilization, well ahead of their time, with standard weights and measures, indoor plumbing, multi-story buildings, advanced languages, and an area of the world that many thought was inhospitable during this time period. However, the Harappans were an impressive civilization. Let's look at more of what they were able to accomplish. Here, we're seeing a Indus floodplain, but also a city with different religious centers, military centers, residential areas, and a planned way and a grid pattern. Here's another view of the same region, and we're seeing perpendicular roads with perpendicular city streets and little avenues, and also buildings that look just like a grid pattern, as you might see in a modern day city. Fairly impressive for the time, and even to today's standards. This is still not very easy to do. Moving to the next slide. Consider for a moment, what do you think this could be? Talk to your neighbor, discuss it, and then we'll come back. It's believed to have been a well for the community, with a large bit of storage and ways to get up there so that people could use the water when there wasn't times of plentiful rain. Another impressive advancement from the Harappan peoples. I'd like for you right now to take a moment and consider this question, talk to your neighbor, and we'll come back. Please pause the video. Hopefully you noticed that they had organized cities, that it probably wasn't a time of chaos, and steel tools weren't quite used in Confucianism. We're not the right place to be talking about that. So this advanced civilization was well ahead of their time. And let's look at this map for a second. Some of you might recognize this. There's a larger version in your packet. There might be some clues within the text. But notice how none of the streets really follow any kind of pattern. They're kind of helter-skelter, built as they just kind of saw fit in a moment, not with a grand view of what the city actually would need for later times, or maybe to help a taxi driver a couple of years later. So this is a really difficult city to get around. And it might interest you to know that if you are to become a taxi driver in this world city, you'll need to go to college for about 4 to 5 years just to remember all of the rules and different ways and dead ends and how to navigate around this incredible city. And we'll be talking about London, England. Surprising for some, maybe not for others. Let's just check out another city floor plan. Here, we're seeing a grid pattern. Let me scroll down. A grid pattern throughout. Fairly easy to navigate. Almost anyone having been here for a short period of time could navigate these streets with some accuracy and be able to get around. Looking at this numbered system, if you can see those bits of text there. You might notice the river systems around. Hopefully you noticed that you live in this area. This is New York, or New York City. And it was a planned city. Very well thought out throughout the 1800s and 1900s, and even to today. New York City is one of the easiest cities to get around, and also uses space really well. And if we go back for a second and compare it with the Harappan city, we're seeing a similar idea here. Not nearly as large on a grand scale, but the concept of an organized, gridded, planned city existed back then and exists today. Well, hopefully you've been able to get through enough of the context for today, and I'll see you next time, folks. And for my students, the period has ended. I cannot control time and space. Please, pack up.